What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the live stream for round 2 of the ZOZO Championship. Had my overlay up still. You can tell it's early in the morning. We're not used to doing these live streams. In fact, there's times where I'm still asleep at this hour. But hey, we've got ourselves a tea time at 11 a.m., so I'm going to be up for that, as any golfer out there will be. And I'm going to bring you some picks here for, I guess, Thursday/Friday at the ZOZO Championship. It's really hard to tell. It's Friday over there. Obviously, Thursday evening for us over here on the east and west coast of the United States. In either circumstance, hopefully everybody is having a great start to their Thursday. And let's hop into this because I do have that tea time and we're running a little bit behind schedule. So let's get this thing rocking. So in terms of the scoring conditions in round 1, I was pleasantly surprised with how easy it played. They put a lot of the pin locations at high spots on the greens, also more accessible pin locations because they really thought it was going to be a slog. They had a forecast for pretty much typhoon conditions all day. And though it was relatively windy, they never got that downpour that, they would have had to play through because there was no electricity in the area, which would have really taken this from, a relatively difficult track, right around half a stroke over par to probably like 2 or 3 strokes over. So they lucked out for sure. They didn't get hit with that wave. And you saw a few people go low as a result. I thought that 4 under might be your first round leader, but you saw Adam Schenk get to 5 under. And of course, Brendan Steele get to 6. So a lot of that was due to the lack of rain. If it rained, your first round leader probably would have been like 3 or 2 under par. Would have been a massive difference there. So they lucked out a little bit. You like to see that, particularly because I played Brendan Steele, Keegan Bradley, guys like a Sam Ryder, Xander Schauffele, all those sort of players. So it worked out for me in a few cases, but it played a little bit differently, right? It was a lot more about just putting yesterday. I mean, even Brendan Steele, for example, made just so many putts. It was ridiculous yesterday. He chipped in once. He holed out from right around 60 yards for a birdie. So he luck sacked his way to that -6 score. You're going to see a lot of the other side, right? Where you have a bunch of these +4 rounds. Davis Riley shot +5. Guys like Lucas Herbert, Corey Connors, who I was extremely bullish on. All of these informed, solid players were still shooting well over par. So this is a difficult track. If you get out of position, particularly off the tee, you're usually going to pay for it. And the one guy that didn't pay for it was Xander Schauffele. He hit 5 of 13 fairways, and there's only 13 around this track because there are 5 par 3s. He only hit 5 fairways, yet still shot -3. You can see only 1 bogey on the day. That was, of course, one of the missed fairways. But if he's going to get away with missing fairways because he's such a good player out of this Zoysia rough, he's going to have to be a target that we take a look at later. But the guys here at the top of the leaderboard, when you look at their driving accuracy stats, most of them were in the short grass a lot more often than not. So I think that Xander Schauffele is kind of like the one counterexample to that argument. But Keegan Bradley was striping it off the tee. Brendan Steele was almost hitting every single fairway. Schenk, that's kind of what he does. So I would expect that going forward, particularly because Xander, and by the way, he was the one going into the week, if you remember, that was complaining about the rough, saying that it was a lot more difficult this year than most. Well, he played out of it most of the time yesterday, yet still got to a -3 score. So couldn't have been that difficult if it's something that he was able to do that with. You look at the weather on Friday, you could see, look, they were projecting for all of this rain and it never came. This is still, I updated this today, right? It's not the forecast from yesterday. They were still calling for the rain that never came. So that's interesting, I suppose. But on Friday, a lot more clear. You could see a small chance of rain early in the morning, but that's going to go by well before play starts. And then in the afternoon when they're playing, it's right around 13 to 14 miles an hour of wind gusts. So it's kind of similar to what they had today. And then the wind gusts a little bit low, actually pretty much the same level, right? It was like 20 to 24 miles an hour yesterday. Today, it's going to be like 25 to 21 miles an hour. So from the wind perspective, I would expect similar scores. It's still going to be plenty wet out there. They did get a lot of rain before the round yesterday. So you could see that added distance. You weren't getting much rollout in the fairways. That's still going to be a factor here for round 2. I would imagine that it's going to play to a similar level of difficulty, yet the score might actually be a little bit higher. And my reasoning for that is in round 1, it was clear that they tried to take it easy on them from the pin locations. I mean, some of them were the center of greens. You're never going to see that. Some of them were in bowls where, they were at the high spot of the green, but essentially all the slopes around it were running to that part of the green. I mean, think of that par 5. It was like one of the easiest eagle opportunities you're going to have on tour. It was like 530. It was to a front pin location, and it was wide open. I mean, you saw, I think, 6 eagles on the day out of 78 players. Let's see, how many was it? No, there was more than 2 eagles. I know that's incorrect because I saw multiple of them on the broadcast. They said 4 at one point, and then Brendan Steele went and added another one at the end. So actually, no, he missed his eagle, so maybe it was 4. It's not 2 though. I know that's incorrect there. It was 4 eagles on the day. 6 bogeys, and I believe there was a couple others over here in like hole 4. Yeah, double bogeys or worse. 9 on hole number 4. Hole 9, you had 6 doubles or worse. Let's see, 1 there, 1 there. Well, 17, you had 1. You had double bogeys on, let's see, all but 1, 2, 3, 4, all but 5 holes. You had double bogeys or worse yesterday. And again, there's only 78 players, right? So this isn't a full 156 player field. You get out of position around this place, you get absolutely screwed. So you're going to see a lot of variance. You're going to see some of the guys that shot like +4, +5 go out there and shoot a great score tomorrow. Go out there, shoot something like 4 or 5 under par. It happens every single year. If you looked at the winning scores from last year, a lot of them, a lot of the top 5, top 10 were around like 4 or 5 under par. It's not like they went out there, shot 1 under every single day, right? They had a few blow up rounds and they had a few ceiling rounds. That's kind of what you're going to get with this golf tournament. Let's head over to the player pool now. We're going to touch on questions at the end. So if you're down there in chat, first off, welcome in. Feel free to say hi. And if you have any questions, I'll touch on them at the end of the video. Just going to go through all of my picks here. Again, we're on a little bit of a time constraint, and we'll get to any of your thoughts at the end. But in terms of the player pool, the general thought process when building lineups here, you're going to get a lot of the chalk around the top plays. So Xander Schauffele, for example, he's going to be your highest owned player on the slate. I don't think that's going to be surprising to anybody. Keegan Bradley's being steamed. Mito Pereira is getting just as much ownership for round 2 showdown as he was going into the week. And that is at a higher price tag now of $9,000. So there's a few things to consider here. So guys like Hideki Matsuyama are the people that I prefer in this type of circumstance because he's about half as owned as is Xander Schauffele. And then you're looking at pretty much the same sort of upside. There was a huge negative sentiment going into the week that Hideki was dealing with an injury. He did withdraw from the Pro-Am, something that we talked about during the Wednesday live stream, but didn't seem to be worrying him all that much. All the shots that I saw looked fluid. He wasn't grabbing his neck. He had a few one-handed finishes, but that's Hideki. He does that for every single round that he plays on the PGA Tour. And in front of his home crowd, there's going to be a lot of nerves. So I imagine anytime he struggles here, he's going to attribute it to that. He's got to bounce back in him. He's going to be motivated. We know that at the very least. He's coming in half as owned as somebody like Xander and lower owned than a Sungjae Im, who had the same round as him today. Tom Kim actually had a slightly better round, but he's also higher owned than somebody like a Hideki. Now, the ownership differences between a Sungjae, Hideki, and Tom Kim aren't massive. So it's not like you're talking about, somebody being chalk versus not chalk. But when you're comparing Hideki versus a Xander Schauffele specifically, that's why I would favor the Hideki Matsuyama side. So it's just a game theory play there. They're both pretty much the same sort of play at this golf course. I mean, Hideki won by 5 last year. Xander Schauffele looks pretty damn good to start the week. There's not really one that I prefer over the other. It's just the one that makes sense from the game theory perspective. Going down to into the 9K range, Colin Morikawa's all right. He had a underrated +1 round. Just couldn't buy a putt there from 15 to 20 feet. Made all the ones that were from 5 to 10, right? All the ones that you're supposed to make, he put at the bottom of the cup. Just couldn't get anything extra to go in. So maybe he has that spike around tomorrow. Love Victor Hovland. He shot -1, kind of sneaky too, which again was better than average. So a lot of the slappies out there are going to see -1. Well, Brendan Steele shot -6. What do you mean? Like, no, dude, relax. Victor Hovland -1 was a little bit better than average round. He's more than capable of spiking. But speaking of spiking, in that same group, so Hovland's playing with Cam Young. I think both of them could go nuclear low today and kind of draft off of each other. But I love taking him in Showdown, particularly when he goes out there. He's chalk, and I don't play him this week, right? I talked him up as a fade. He struggles in round 1, and then all the slappies out there want to abandon ship. They're like, oh, bad course fit. I should have listened to that guy Luke out there that said not to play him this week, right? And the thing is, he's still more than capable of going out there and popping. I told you I was the most scared to fade him out of anybody in the field. And if people are going to get this false sense of confidence that he's just not going to go out there and have that sort of round, yeah, count me in, right? 17% owned. Yeah, I'll take him in 40, 50% of my lineups. And if he goes out there and he sucks, Okay, right? The fade for 4 round stuff is looking pretty good, but I don't think he's going to suck. I think he's got that ceiling round in him, and it's not going to happen every single time. But when you're giving me a low ownership on somebody with his ceiling, which is, like a 6-7 under par round, like he's capable of doing that even on this difficult of a track, you might have to have him today. And he's only $9,300. So love myself some Cameron Young, somebody I wanted to point out. Cam Davis, another high upside player who started +4 through his first 5 holes. So he bogeyed the first, birdied the second. I was like, okay, right, nice bounce back, Cam. Let's get under par now. Double bogey, double bogey. Just as horrible a start as you could possibly think. As actually +4 through the first 4 holes. It's even worse when you think about it that way. And he ended up even par, right? So after that horrendous start, completely turned around his round. And if there were a shots gained, holes 5 through 18, right, he'd be number 1 in the field. Just put on a great performance there. Isn't getting a lot of ownership, and he probably should be chalk considering how many birdies he made, especially the momentum going into this round. But he's not, right? Like if this was somebody who in round 1 shot +4 and then round 2 shot -4, he'd be mega chalk going into the 3rd round, right? Because people will be like, oh, wow, he's playing well. We got to ride the hot hand, right? That's essentially what happened, right? Except his whole first round was just the first 4 holes. And then he overcame that and is coming in with that momentum. So that's why I like guys like a Cam Davis who had deceptively good rounds, right? And good, right? He shot 0.5 shots better than the field average. So I don't want to give him too much of a pat on the back, but I think you get the point there. He's being under-owned because of that false misconception there. All right, Seabass, another guy I like getting to. $7,900. He shot +2. He didn't even make that many birdies. So there's not really some, icing on the cake there or a silver lining that we can go off kind of like we did with the Cameron Davis there. But you're talking about a showdown legend. Seabass is one of the most aggressive players on tour. Siwoo Kim can definitely give him a little bit of a debate for that kind of argument. But I like him there at $7,900. He's more than capable of getting to his ceiling performance. He's volatile, kind of just like a Cam Davis. I think Seabass and Davis are really taking a step forward. When we looked at the shots gained metrics for Seabass going into the week, just to give you an idea, let's look at this. So he's gaining across the board, except for just a slight losing around the green. You look at Cameron Davis, he's gaining across the board. That was not the case a year ago. A year ago, they were like gaining in 2 out of the 4 categories. They're very inconsistent with the putter and, huge losers around the green. Cam Davis has found a way to make that a positive, and Seabass has turned it into right around a neutral. That's why they're more consistent players now. So if he hits his median, you're not going to want him in DFS, but that's probably going to be like 1-2 under par today. His ceiling is now like 7 or 8 under par, right? Because he's plugged some of those holes. And in the past, we've already seen some of those flash performances. So in Showdown, I like getting to those highly volatile players. Siwoo Kim fits that same sort of description. And let's see, just to point him out. I mean, we're going to talk about Wyndham Clark. He's another one of those snappers. Peter Manotti is probably the best example in the field of that sort of player. We're going to talk about him at the end of this video. Just those high upside players that in Showdown, go out there and have those nuclear rounds from time to time. There's an art form to taking a place low, and he has that mastered, that's for sure. Lucas Herbert shot +4. No one's going to play him because he had a quote-unquote horrible round. That's going to happen to everybody this week except for the guys that finish in the top 5. If you want to win a GPP, right, with a player, you probably don't want them to shoot +4, but this is Showdown, right? It doesn't matter. It's a completely clean slate. Anybody that thinks that they can't play Herbert because he had a bad round 1, well, we can leverage off of them and take advantage of them. So he's a solid putter, more than capable of getting to his ceiling, and really that's it. Just he's criminally under-owned, only 2.8% owned there. Let's see. He had 8.4% on Seabass, right? 13.9 on Cameron Davis, all well below their peers. So these all are quote-unquote leverage plays that you can get to that aren't even getting all that much attention. I think they should. Wyndham Clark is the next player I want to touch on, $7,400. He's not the best course fit because he's more of a bomber, right? He's not the most precise player, but he's a good player on bent grass, and he's in form. Like over the last few months, kind of like a Sebastian Munoz, kind of like a Cameron Davis, has just been playing better golf. He's figured out the around the green play. He's a consistent putter, consistent off the tee player. And on approach, he hasn't been all that bad. And, that seems like that seems like a bad thing to say about somebody, right? Like, he's not all that bad when it comes to that. But look at this, right? He's just losing a little bit on approach, which for Wyndham Clark is actually pretty good because he's going to gain a bunch off the tee and with the putter. So much so that he can gain like 5-6 strokes off the tee in any one tournament and 5 or 6 strokes on with the putter. So if he can do that in a single round, right, that can get you to your spike performance. Just don't lose 2-3 strokes to the field on approach. So I like him at $7,400. 4-round stuff, not as exciting because he is so volatile. But when you give him to me for a showdown type of purpose, where it's just 18 holes, I think he makes sense, particularly when he's only 5.8% owned. Next up, we've got Kevin Streelman. He's not the most sexy play, but his form coming in really surprised me. So the fact that he had the round, kind of struggles here in round 1 surprised me. I mean, look at this. He's gaining across the board. And most significantly with the ball striking categories where he's gaining over a third of a stroke in both categories. You love to see that. You're not going to find that from anyone else in the 6K range. So I'm getting there. It's just you hope that he bounces back from the bad performance, and he's super low owned as a result. CT Pan has always played well in Japan. He's from Thailand, so he has a lot of family ties. He comes over here all the time. He has spoken at length that when he's over in this part of the world, he feels a little bit more comfortable. So he didn't have the best round 1, shot +1, kind of a theme going on here, but that's why he's only 2.6% owned. Just to give you an idea, it might be like, oh, that's, it's a 6K option. That's a lot of ownership. There's only 78 players this week. Your average ownership per player is right around like 7.5%, 8%. I haven't actually done the number, quick math, just look it up. It's not that difficult to do. You take 600 and you divide it by 78, right? And your average ownership is 7.7%. I was spot on. 2.6% down here is still right a little bit higher than your average player, but let's give you an idea here. Some of the chalk. So Kazumi Higa is like 7% owned. Adam Long is like 5% owned, right? He's like twice as owned as a CT Pan. Brandon Wu is like 5% owned. Down here a little bit further, Danny Lee is like 4 or 5% owned in my projections. By the way, if you want access to those, they're on the Patreon page. A link is in the description of the video. He's much lower owned than all of those sort of players. And is he half as likely to succeed? A third as likely to succeed as an Iwata? A fourth as likely to succeed as somebody like a Kazuya Higa? The answer to that is a clear no, right? So that's why you make those sort of pivots, particularly when there's no placement points to worry about. And with a player that I think is a relatively good course fit. And the last pick we'll touch on before we hop into any questions and then hop on out of here is Peter Malnati. So he's a showdown hero. We know that. Great putter on bent grass. Always can just spike out of nowhere. So he's 0.8% owned. He shot +4, kind of like a few of the other players we're taking here. And he has all the upside in the world to be aggressive. And that's something that I meant to mention earlier with a few of these bounce back options is you're in a no-cut event. You have no incentive now that you're in like next to last place to spin your wheels, to not try, right? To just go out there and make 18 pars. You have all the incentive in the world to try and go after every single pin, right? Get up there on the leaderboard because you're getting a paycheck anyways. The difference between a 30th place and a 40th place is next to nothing. But if you go out there and you have just 2 good rounds over the last 2, right? Shoot someone like -3 and then -4, you could get yourself into the top 10. It's that kind of event. Again, remember, single digits under par is probably going to be in the top 5 this week. Like Brendan Steele there at -6, the winning score might be like, it's so early to tell. The course can play so many different ways. It could be like a 10, 12 under par winner, right? Like he's halfway there already, right? But he's very well could move back to the field. You could have somebody that's like -1 or -2 right now be leading after today. It's one of those volatile sort of leaderboards. You wanted the guys that are playing from behind that have all the incentive to be aggressive. Whereas a Brendan Steele, because the winning score might be like a -10 or -12 or even lower than that, like something closer to single digits, he doesn't have as much incentive to be aggressive, right? He's going to be a little bit more conservative because he knows how difficult the golf course can be. And in the back of his head, he has to know that yesterday's round was a little bit lucky, right? He had a hole out. He had a shot that he dunked from the fairway. He had a multiple long putts that he was draining from 30, 40 feet. Coming into the week, he was one of the worst putters on tour, losing over a stroke per round with the putter. I mean, like, there's just going to be huge mindset differences between some of these players. So getting to a Malnati makes sense. Pan, Streelman, Herbert, who we talked about before. Pretty much anybody who's over par is going to have that sort of incentive. What we'll do now is catch up on chat, see if there's any questions. If not, I'm going to go ahead and make a lineup on DraftKings and then hopping out of here. Tom says, your guy Steely paying off so far. Yeah, 4 putts over 25 feet. Yeah, I played him. Hey, I have him in my lineups. He's in all my top lineups in the GPP, so I'm happy about it. It's just it's not sustainable. Like, he's 100% going to come back to the field. Which, I don't know. You could play him in Showdown. I don't think it's the worst idea. I'm not going to play him in Showdown. But I prefer the guys that are going to be a little bit more aggressive, right? They're going to have that go-getter sort of mentality. So let me go ahead and share my screen. We'll go over to the DraftKings. This will be the last thing we do here. And then we'll hop on out of here because I have a tee time in less than 40 minutes at this point. So, we'll do a prize picks look at the board too, because before we went live, they didn't have the full board up there. I'm assuming at this point that they do. So if they do, we can talk through that as well. So in terms of making a lineup here, let's go through our GPP process. And as per usual, when we're making a GPP build, we're looking to try and differentiate ourselves. So you could take Xander. I don't think he's the worst play. In fact, I'm playing him today. I just want to be fully transparent there. Now, I was talking shit about him earlier, but he's in my player pool. He's actually my highest owned player today. It's just that if you're only entering a few lineups, right? I won 50 max. I can afford to play some of these chalky players. You're only playing like 4 or 5 lineups, you should probably go to the pivot, somebody like a Hideki Matsuyama. If you do so, you save a little bit of salary, and you could be a little bit chalkier at some of the other positions. We're going to take Cam Davis, who I absolutely love today. We're also going to go scroll down, take a few more 8K options. Let's put Sahith Theegala in there, right? He's +1, kind of starting from behind the 8 ball, should be aggressive. He's already an aggressive player to begin with. Let's put Munoz in there. And you can see this lineup isn't anything, crazy. There's no rocket science going on here. And we still have $7,300 remaining for our last player. Plenty of solid options that you could consider. One of them that rhymes with T is an exceptionally good option there. But hopefully you see what I did there. Either way, all these guys are going to be relatively low, right? Like 17% on Hideki, 12%, 13% on Cam Davis. Single digits on a Theegala, Munoz, and Wyndham Clark. This lineup, you don't even have to leave salary on the table. You can spend all of your salary if you want to, and you're going to have pretty much a next to zero chance of duplicating yourself. Now, if somebody enters it from watching this video, especially if they enter the guy who rhymes with T on there, you might end up duplicating yourself with a few other people. But this sort of thought process where, you don't really even have to worry about ownership because you're fading the chalky guy up top is comforting, right? You don't have to be nearly as cognizant with your lineup. You can kind of just pick the guys that you want to, which in Showdown, it's kind of the way to build lineups, right? Like it's a single round sample size. It's already hard to predict golf over 4 rounds. At the end of the day, you should just try and take the highest upside players and jam them into lineups in different combinations, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, I have to take Xander. Like Xander Schauffele is my core pick for Showdown tomorrow. I'm going to play him like every lineup. If that's your thought process for any Showdown slate and you're playing 150 lineups, you're crazy. Like it's not the way to win a playing Showdown. You got to take a little bit more of a scattershot, buckshot approach because it's so random, especially from round to round. So if I were to take Xander Schauffele here, I'm not going to be nearly as confident that this is going to be a unique lineup, right? So if we take the guy at the top there, right, and we were to put him into this lineup, even though he's going to be like 5% owned and the rest of the guys outside of Xander are only going to be like 10, maybe like 15% owned at the very most, because Xander Schauffele is going to be owned in like 40, 50% of lineups, I don't know, like double, triples your chance of having a dupe with other players. Skyhook DFS, if you guys have seen him on Twitter, first off, highly recommend that you'd follow him. He tweets out all the duplicate lineups or the most duplicated lineups in the large field GPPs, and every single time, literally every single time. First off, the chalkiest player on the slate is in every single of like the top 30, 40 top duplicated lineups. And then number 2 and 3 when it comes to the chalkiest players are also in that lineup, right? So first off, Xander, he's the most chalky player, right? So having him just infinitely increases your chances of having a dupe. And then every other chalky player that you have, right? So if we had a Xander in there and we want to take another piece of chalk, let's see. And then in the 9K range, who's like the chalk? I guess Keegan, right? So if we went to Keegan rather than Cam Davis here, if you start with these 2 players, like good luck making a unique lineup, right? Like if I was going to try and play those 2 together, like you can, right? It's doable. You're going to need to leave some salary on the table and probably think a little bit unique, like a Peter Malnati, a Chad Ramey, a Rakuya Hoshino, a Kita Nakajima, right? Leaving a whole $800 on the table, because having those two players just increases your multiplicative ownership just so much. So it's not a good thing to walk into. So I would try to avoid taking multiple pieces of chalk in Showdown, especially for GPP sort of formats. That is all I've got here, though. I got to get out of here, get to the tea time. Tom says he agrees with the regression. Yeah, unfortunately, he's going to come back to the field. But fortunately for us, that means that guys like Morikawa are likely to play better. Guys like Davis Riley, right, more likely to bounce back. That's how it goes both ways, right? Little double-edged sword there. But best of luck with all of your lineups, guys. If you're watching this on replay, feel free to drop any questions or comments you have down in the YouTube comments. I'll try to get back to you before lock. We have until 8 p.m. And we know when I'm there at the turn, maybe in between holes, maybe I'll be able to get to some of your YouTube comments there. But hopefully we shoot low today. I still dealing with an injury. I think, I made it clear like a month or two ago. Maybe new people don't know this. I ended up dislocating my shoulder, not playing golf for quite some time, about a month and a half there. Also been really busy. So my golf game's really struggled. So hopefully today we can get it back on track. So that's the goal at least. Either way, we're going to have fun with it. Hopefully we win some money for Showdown tonight, also for our 4-round contest. And we'll hopefully do another live stream tomorrow. I'm thinking right around like 10 a.m. Eastern time. Today was a little bit more last second, but I'll get the live stream up a little bit earlier. You'll see it on my social medias a little bit earlier this time, so it won't be as much of a random last second kick in as it was today. And we'll get it done again for round 3. But best of luck, like I said, and let's